With both the MLB draft and the trade deadline in the rearview mirror, on today's show, I will break down my updated list of the top 10 prospects in the Mets farm system.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, I've been sitting on my updated top 10 prospect list for a couple weeks now as I reworked the list after the Mets drafted Carson Benge in the first round. Little spoiler alert, he's going to be featured somewhere on this list. And so I went through, looked at my top 10 from prior to this season, adjusted it from what we've seen so far this year, and added Benge on there. I thought today was a good day to finally unveil it, as I want to wait 2 segments to talk about the Mets losing to the Mariners. So we'll get to the game recap and the news items of the day in the final segment. Let's start talking prospects. And first things first, this was my top 10 list heading into the season. I had Jet Williams as the number 1 prospect in the Mets system, Drew Gilbert number 2, Luis Angel Acuna number 3, Christian Scott number 4, Ryan Clifford number 5, Ronnie Mauricio number 6, Blade Tidwell number 7, Mike Vassell number 8, Colin Houck number 9, Kevin Parada was my 10th prospect, and I really hate myself for putting him on that list because I felt peer pressure to do it. Because a lot of Mets fans still love Kevin Parada as a prospect. And I don't know why. I've been talking down on the guy for a couple years, and yet I just couldn't hold him off the list. And I remember at the time there was a couple names that I thought I might want to put on there. Alex Ramirez was one. Glad I didn't do that. I was also looking at Brandon Sproat. That would have been a really good addition in retrospect. And I will note, going into the season at Just Baseball, the site that I write for, we had Brandon Sproat at number 5. Aram Leighton was ahead of the curve on Brandon Sproat. He was dead on because now he's got him all the way at number 18 on his top 100 prospect list of all the prospects in baseball, the number 4 pitching prospect in the game right now. And that leads me to my new number 1, Brandon Sproat. Welcome to the top 10, and you are atop the list. I believe he is the top prospect in the Met system right now. Now, granted, I know a lot of you could say, well, Jet Williams, Drew Gilbert, you're really just knocking those guys because of injury. And that's not why I'm knocking them. To me, it's more of, putting Sproat where he belongs because I think he might have the most upside of any prospect in this system. This guy could be a perennial all-star. If you had to ask me of any prospect on this list, who is the most likely to win a Rookie of the Year? It's Brandon Sproat. Do I think Jet Williams could be a great player? Absolutely. I think he can be a starting second baseman or center fielder for the Mets for a long time. And I'd say the same thing about Gilbert as a guy who could start in the outfield. Are either of those guys going to be all-stars? I'm not entirely sure. Are either of those guys going to finish top 3 in Rookie of the Year? I don't know. Brandon Sproat is a guy who I can see winning the Rookie of the Year next year, or at least finishing close to the top of those votes. He's got unbelievable stuff. This year, even after his clunker in AAA, combining what he's done at all 3 levels, high A, AA, AAA, he's got a 2.53 ERA, 92 and a third innings pitched with 114 strikeouts. Guy who can throw over 100 miles per hour. He's got a disgusting changeup, and he has, a slider he can mix in as well. Does have a really rounded out, pitch mix where he can go with the fastball, the changeup, the breakers. He's got it all, but particularly fastball, changeup as 2++ pitches. This guy has frontline potential. He could be your number 2 starter next year if everything broke right. That's putting a lot on him, but this is one of those guys who could come up and hit the ground running whenever he does get that chance to make his debut. I've talked a lot about Brandon Sproat this year. I've mentioned the possibility of him pitching out of the bullpen. We'll see exactly when he makes that debut, but Brandon Sproat, in my eyes, is the top prospect in the Met system. And I wouldn't say it's not close because Jet Williams is a really good prospect, but to me, Sproat has just had this rapid ascension to the top of this system and deserves that recognition. Now, I do still have Jet Williams at number 2, and Drew Gilbert's number 3 for me. I thought long and hard about moving Ryan Clifford into the top 3 and maybe pushing Drew Gilbert out of it, but that didn't feel fair to me because Ryan Clifford, while he's had a very good season, okay, especially in Double-A, in 64 games in Double-A, batting average, you're not going to be blown away, 217, but he's got a 350 on base, 470 slugs, that's an 820 OPS, 13 home runs in those 64 games with 16 doubles. He's splitting time between first base, right and left field. Hopefully he can be an outfielder when he gets to the big leagues. That certainly helps a prospect's value instead of being stuck at first base, but he has a chance to be a pretty good defender at first. And then in the outfield, we'll see if he can translate, but the arm is an asset that he has. This guy has the most power in the Met system. So I got him at number 4. And again, in the middle, I got Jet Williams and Drew Gilbert, guys that we haven't seen play this year. Drew Gilbert, we finally are. He is healthy now off of his hamstring strain. He's playing in AAA, doing pretty well. I mean, it's such a small sample size. We can't really read too much into it, but at least Gilbert's back on the field. And by the end of the year, we'll have a much better idea of where to put him. So when I do an end of the season update, maybe I will slide Clifford above him if Drew Gilbert hasn't put up very good numbers in his, will be about 2 months of playing time in AAA. Jet Williams, I don't know if we're going to see him this year or not. He is swinging a bat again after the wrist surgery, so that's good. I think he's going to be the star that the Mets are going to send to the Arizona Fall League, and he could have a great Arizona Fall League and maybe put himself in position to try to win a job out of camp next year. I think that's pretty unlikely since he has missed an entire season of development and getting a chance to play in the upper levels in the minor leagues. But this was a guy that skyrocketed through the system last year and was the top prospect going into the season. So I'm not going to move Williams any lower than number 2. Drew Gilbert, I have at 3 for now. Clifford could, flip frog with him or leapfrog with him. Jeez. I could flip those 2. Whatever. At the end of the year, depending on what we see from Gilbert down the stretch, and also how Ryan Clifford closes out his season, because he still has some time here to put up even better numbers than he has already in Double-A. All right, number 5 and number 6. I am putting Carson Benge at number 5. So yes, that means Luis Angel Acuna has dropped out of the top 5 for me. I'll get to that in a minute. The reason why I put Benge at number 5 before playing a game is because this guy has 5-tool potential. Talking about someone that could have been a pitcher in the big leagues, but he's going to focus just on outfield, which honestly is a little bit of a boost to me, that he's just starting, not worrying about the pitching, just focusing on what is his path to the big leagues, which is playing in the outfield. And he has a chance to be a center fielder in the big leagues. And again, they put that 5-tool label on him. We got to see what happens in games. And I talked about this the other day. He's got that new car smell. He just got drafted. So it's a lot easier to be high on a guy before he plays. It's like Colin Houck this year was a top 10 prospect for, I think, most publications. And now we're watching him play in professional baseball, and it hasn't been good. We'll talk about him in the Just Miss segment, coming up here. He's not in my top 10 anymore because he hasn't played well. If Carson Benge, ends up playing bad down the stretch this year, I wouldn't read too much into it. But if next year Benge still isn't hitting, he's going to fall off of this list or drop on this list. But I think there's a chance that Carson Benge, by the end of next season, could be atop this list. So he's got ridiculous potential. And the reason why I had him at number 5 over Luis Angel Acuna, it's because Acuna has not had a good season in AAA. Now, I know at times you might look at batting average, like, oh, he's doing fine. And he's got the chance to really be a valued player when it comes to his speed and defense. But we've got a pretty large sample size of this season. And in a league that is pretty hitter-friendly, Luis Angel Acuna has a 683 OPS. Now, that is 84th out of 97 qualified hitters in the International League. So he has been statistically on just OPS alone one of the worst hitters in that league. Now, I will say this for Acuna. The difference between AA and AAA, I've talked about this before. AAA is really becoming this taxi squad, right? So a lot of guys who are in the big leagues or have big league experience going up and down. So for a hitter, what you're going to see that's different compared to AA pitching is AA guys are going to pitch to their strengths. In AAA, guys are going to pitch to your weaknesses. There's more game planning. And so for Acuna, he's really starting to deal with, the league adjusting to him. As he makes adjustments, the league's going to adjust back, and he hasn't been able to be on a sustained good run of baseball throughout the year. So I look at Acuna and I said, well, he's still a good prospect. He's a high probability big leaguer. So that means that alone will tell you that he's still a top 10 prospect in this system, because if nothing else, this guy's going to be a utility player for you, guy that can play literally any position on the field, who can bring you great speed to your bench. I believe Acuna will play a role in the Mets at some point in the next 5 years. And probably as soon as next season, you'll see him get some big league time, play all over, and he could add some value. And I wouldn't just say, oh, he's never going to hit, because he has a track record last year and other years in the minor leagues where he has hit. And he can work on some things this offseason, come back a new hitter, and he might look completely different next year. But from what we've seen this year, I can't put him over the other 5 prospects that I have ahead of him on this list: Brandon Sproat, Jet Williams, Drew Gilbert, Ryan Clifford, and even a Carson Benge. Because Carson Benge, I look at it right now and think there's a lot more ceiling that he can tap into, where Acuna, I just don't know what that ceiling is going to be. I honestly think that he might just be a really good bench piece that can still be a quality big leaguer, but maybe not an everyday starting second baseman who's got the type of potential that his name unfortunately suggests. Because when your older brother's an MVP, people are going to think a little bit higher of you. It's just, and they're going to expect more from you. Not to say he can never live up to any of those expectations. He could be a good starter in the big leagues, but I think any of the other 5 names, I can envision a world where they're an all-star, and I think I'm past that point with Acuna where I would expect that. Now, there's 4 more prospects I have on this list, as well as some just miss. So we're going to get to all those names in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Liquid IV. Get hydrated with electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients from the #1 powdered hydration brand in America, Liquid IV. The reason why I love Liquid IV is the fact that it tastes amazing, particularly strawberry lemonade. That's my go-to flavor. But also it's the convenience, and it is that different feel you get when it comes to hydration. With Liquid IV, they have 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, with 8 essential vitamins and nutrients. I feel the difference when I drink Liquid IV. It might take me a couple glasses of water to feel as hydrated as when I just drink 1 Liquid IV. There's always no GMOs. It's vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. No more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidIV.com and use the code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. Stay up to date with all the latest from the world of sports by checking out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. Now, before I get into my final 4 prospects from this top 10, I do want to acknowledge that Christian Scott was not included on this list, as he's going to get enough service time this year to no longer be considered a prospect. And the same thing goes for Ronnie Mauricio, who's on the MLB injured list and is racking up service time as well as an MLB salary this season. So those 2 guys, I've graduated off the top 10. That's why they weren't included. Otherwise, they would absolutely be on this list. All right, number 7, I got Blade Tidwell. Now, Tidwell pitched to a 2.41 ERA in AA this year, 37 1/3 innings pitched. He got an aggressive promotion up to AAA, and he struggled there. He has a 5.63 ERA in 11 games and 48 innings pitched with 41 strikeouts, a 1.52 whip. For me, I really debated on 7 and 8, and number 8 is Jonah Tong. And at first, I had Tong ahead of him, but ultimately, I decided to put Blade above Jonah Tong because he is being tasked with a really tough league to pitch in AAA. And we've seen other top pitching prospects like Mike Vassell struggle. We have seen Dom Hamill struggle this year. Brandon Sproat in his first start struggled. The only guy who hasn't struggled at all in AAA is Christian Scott. Only one. So you got to give Tidwell a little bit of a pass and also recognize how good he was in AA. And for where he's at in his development, if he had spent this entire year in AA and pitched to a 2.41 ERA, he'd probably be even higher on this list. So just because he got that aggressive promotion, I didn't want to ding him too much. Where Jonah Tong has been very good, and he was unbelievable in low A, where he had 36 strikeouts and a little over 18 innings pitched, gets an aggressive promotion as well up to high A. And there he has pitched well, but he hasn't pitched to that same extreme that he did in low A. So while Tong has been very good, he hasn't been so far enough elite that I put him over Tidwell at this stage. Although I look at those arms very similar at this point. I think there are two really solid pitching prospects that I have some high hopes on being able to be quality big league starters for multiple years. And honestly, with pitching prospects, if you can say that, that means they're a really good prospect. Because as much as you want to envision, oh, Mike Vassell will definitely be in a big league rotation, or Dom Hamill will, some of these guys are never going to get to that point. They're going to end up being relievers or swingmen, and they're never going to get that full chance to be a big league starter. When someone analyzes prospects and they tell you a guy has, number 3 potential, which is what Aram Layton put on Christian Scott prior to this season. I know a lot of Mets fans who read our top 100 and read our top 15 prospect list. They saw that note about him being a number 3 prospect or number 3 starting pitcher at the big league level and thought, man, how is he the best pitching prospect in the Mets system? And he's only got the ceiling of a number 3. A number 3 starter is really good. A number 3 starter is a guy that is able to take the ball every 5th day and pitch to a sub 4 ERA, which is very hard to do in the big leagues. Frontline potential is reserved for the elitist of pitching prospects like a Brandon Sproat. So I just wanted to break all that down. Again, though, getting to the rankings, Tidwell at 7, Tong at 8. And then my last 2 to round out this list, I could have gone in a bunch of directions. I ultimately went with Jeremy Rodriguez at number 9. Rodriguez is playing in the complex league this year. He's got a 282 average, 355 on base, 400 slug, only 3 home runs. He has 17 stolen bases, but he has been caught 8 times. He's been playing primarily shortstop, but also has gotten time at second base, third base. He's 18 years old. Jeremy Rodriguez has had a solid season. He hasn't completely wowed in the complex league, but he's definitely held his own. And for your first year stateside, that's a pretty strong start to your real career trying to advance through the farm system. So Jeremy Rodriguez has a lot of potential. It's the guy they got in the Tommy Pham trade. I got him at number 9. Number 10 is Jesus Baez, who I thought about putting at 9 because he's had the better season. He showcased a lot of power in St. Lucie, where he hit 10 home runs and 14 doubles in 64 games played with a 782 OPS. Got called up to high A at 19 years old and was holding his own in 8 games, had a 780 OPS there as well. This guy was a shortstop, still has played there this year, but also played a lot of third base and second base, so can play all over the infield. Unfortunately, he had a knee injury that required surgery, and he's done for the year. But Jesus Baez bounced back after a really rough first year on the complex last year and showcased the power that made him such an exciting prospect in the Mets system when he had, I think it was 7 home runs in the Dominican Summer League. And it's rare to see teenagers hit that many home runs. So now to see him still a teenager at 19, popping 11 home runs between low A and high A, really, really exciting stuff for him. I think he is probably not consensus top 10 prospect in the system. I think a lot of people will have some other names at the back end of their list, but he's now definitely a consensus top 20 guy and someone that I think a lot of eyes will be on going into next season. Now, notable omissions. I got Mike Vassell and Dom Hamill. We've talked about them enough this year. Right now, they're starting depth in AAA. Vassell has had a much better run lately. Dom Hamill hasn't really figured it out yet. Vassell, you could have absolutely made an argument to put him in the top 10. I just don't think he has a very high ceiling. Nolan McLean, another notable pitcher, former two-way guy. Now he's focusing just on pitching. Hasn't gotten great results at AA, but he's super raw. So I'm excited to see what a full offseason of development can do for him. And I wouldn't be surprised if he repeats AA next year, but has a lot better results. This guy has really good stuff. If nothing else, he could be a really nice reliever for the Mets in a couple years. All right, now on the hitters, Colin Houck. I told you I took him off the top 10. He's got a 614 OPS in St. Lucie. Now it's his first professional season. Got to give him some time. He can absolutely get right back on this list next year, but it's been a rough debut year for Colin Houck, who, of course, was the Mets' first-round pick last year. Jacob Reimer, I almost considered putting on this list because I loved him going into the season. You can go back and listen to some of my breakdowns prior to the year. I was really high on Jacob Reimer. Unfortunately, he had a really bad hamstring injury and was out for pretty much all the year. He's played 16 games so far, and he just got to his level that he should have been at to start the year, which is Brooklyn. So he played some games in the Complex League, played some in St. Lucie. Now he's up in Brooklyn. He has hit very well at each of those stops so far. Again, it's only 16 games played. He has a 786 OPS overall. I think he has a 333 average in Brooklyn when I checked. That's at 5 games. So what can we take from it? Jacob Reimer might knock off Baez or Rodriguez if he has a great close to the season for me. When I do my end of the year update, like I said, I was really high on him. Unfortunately, he's just another one of the Mets' top prospects that just has missed this year due to injury. The last two notable ones that I wanted to mention, we could go even longer and longer on this list if we wanted to, but I wanted to talk about the high price signings that the Mets have made in the international market, the catchers they've signed the last couple of years. The first one, Giovanni Rodriguez, who got a huge bonus from the Mets this past offseason. He was it the top signing overall? I think it was over $3 million. He got a ton. It was a huge amount of the Mets pool went to this one catching prospect, Giovanni Rodriguez. He has to be mentioned, but for me, I'm not going to put him on a top 10 list just yet when he is still in the Dominican Summer League and he hasn't put up great numbers. I'm not going to react to it because if I did, like I had previously to Diverson Gutierrez last year, then I might be looking foolish a year from now because I didn't think that highly of Gutierrez coming into this year because he put up really bad numbers in the Dominican Summer League. Well, this year he's on the complex and he's hitting 309 with a 467 on base and a 506 slug. He's got a 973 OPS in 29 games. So all of a sudden, Gutierrez is showing why the Mets signed him to, 1.9. He got another big signing bonus. I don't have it in front of me how much he got from the Mets, but it was the highest signing they made, I think, a couple off seasons ago, the highest price signing in the international market. So Gutierrez is going to shoot up some lists this year, I think, based on what he's doing in the Complex League. He might be a top 20 prospect in this system. And when it comes to the catching prospects, you got Rodriguez, you got Gutierrez. You do still technically have Kevin Parada. You can't just omit him entirely. And then you have Ron Hernandez. Those are the 4 best catching prospects in this system, giving the Mets a pretty good amount of guys that could pan out and potentially be a backup for Francisco Alvarez in a few years or could be trade bait for other teams. So the Mets have done pretty well in that department lately. Now, again, these lists are obviously subject to change. End of the year, I will do another update of this top 10, and then we'll do one leading into next season. But I wanted to give you my take on where the Mets farm system is at right now. With Christian Scott graduating, obviously this list has gotten a little bit weaker. Ronnie Mauricio as well. But I think the top 5 prospects in this system are ones to be really excited about with Sproat, Williams, Gilbert, Clifford, and of course, Carson Benge just added. And then I think there's a lot of upside guys further down the ranks in this system. Anyway, we're going to talk about the Mets' loss to the Mariners and everything else you need to know about the wildcard race in just a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience are what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers to roof rack, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into an MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me. Anytime news breaks on the Mets, you can ask me questions anytime. I also have the Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. I just bought another series of photos. So we're going to start running some more of those giveaways for the insiders. If you want to be part of that, make sure you find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com facebook.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so before we get into the game recap, because I'm going to stall as long as I can, I don't want to talk about that game that I spent a couple hours watching tonight. Let's go through the injury updates. Starling Marte will start his rehab assignment in AA on Sunday. The Mets expect him back at some point during the homestand. I'd imagine probably not that first series. There's always an off day on Monday in AA. He's going to play on Sunday, and you want to see him at some point play a full game. So I imagine he plays on Sunday, maybe plays on Tuesday and Wednesday. If all things go well, maybe we see him back on Friday after an off day on Thursday. That's what I would sort of expect the timeline to be for Marte's return. Now, good news on Christian Scott. He is feeling no pain in that pitching arm and will begin a throwing program this upcoming week. Now, we have no idea how much the Mets are going to push him this year. I honestly think it's probably just about getting him healthy, get him on the mound to make a start in AAA potentially on a rehab assignment at the end of this season, go into the offseason feeling healthy. But if he goes through this throwing program, everything's checking out, starts throwing bullpens, everything's fine, facing hitters. There is a world where Christian Scott can pitch for the Mets down the stretch this year. If he's starting throwing and there's still 7 weeks left of the season, he could come back. So I wouldn't rule it out. The only reason why I really put it on the back burner and not think about it too much or expect anything is just because this guy is so important to the organization, particularly for next season, as someone who they would hope could be in that rotation from opening day. And I just don't think they would do anything to jeopardize that for this year. So we'll see how that throwing program goes, and I'll give you updates whenever we get them. Now, Reed Garrett is going to be active on Saturday night. The Mets made a roster move. Alex Young will be the corresponding move. Tim Britton was the one that I saw who tweeted that out after the game tonight. Alex Young pitched a scoreless 8th inning in the game on Friday. Had a 1 ERA across 10 appearances. And to me, this indicates how much the Mets probably value Danny Young and the experience he's gotten this year over Alex Young. Because again, Alex Young has gotten good results, but Danny Young has way more experience on this team this year and is going through a good stretch and had a really good stretch prior to the last time he was sent down. He's also been sent down 3 times this year. You can only send a guy down 5 times. So you're running out of those options for Danny Young, where Alex Young, you probably have more roster flexibility. But I also think this is a testament to the stuff that Danny Young has. Anyone who's been listening to this show throughout this season knows how much I love Danny Young, and particularly did prior to that last demotion where it was down to Young and Danielle Nunez, and I wanted both of them to stay and Jake Diekman to go, and Danny Young went down, and I was a little bit upset about that decision at the time. I think Danny Young's a good pitcher, so I'm happy to see he's still on the team. A little, frustrating for Alex Young, I'm sure, as he did nothing to deserve a demotion, but that's just the number crunch that the Mets are going through right now, and we'll see how Reed Garrett pitches upon his return here. He could be a really nice addition back into this bullpen. I'm very curious to see what it looks like because there was obviously that great start to the season for Reed Garrett, but then he had a prolonged period of pitching pretty bad. Granted, he was clearly overused. Maybe now in a more filled out bullpen, he can slide into a role where he doesn't have to be pitching, 2 out of every 3 days, and maybe he finds that same early season success. All right, I think I've delayed as long as I can. We got to talk about the game. Mets lose 6-0. That's it, right? All right, that'll be all. No. Look, Jose Quintana threw the ball pretty well tonight. Now, he ultimately ends up with 4 earned runs on his ledger, but I think he threw the ball. He threw the ball a lot better than those numbers would suggest. He threw a hanging curveball to Ryan Bliss in the 2nd inning that he hit out for a 2-run homer. Other than that, through the first 6 innings, Jose Quintana was great, and he kept his pitch count down to the point where they threw him back out there for the 7th inning, and he nearly got out of that one too because he gives up a leadoff walk. Then it was a ridiculously slowly hit grounder to Jeff McNeil that ends up being an infield hit. I mean, just tough luck there for Quintana. Gets a strikeout, then a comeback or hit to him that was too slow for him to turn 2 on. So that's the 2nd out of the inning, but there's 2 runners in scoring position, and then he gives up a more well-struck single. So you look at that inning in the 7th, sort of some unfortunate luck for him. And then Adam Ottavino comes on to try to clean things up. Actually, I guess that might be 5 runs to his ledger. that shows you the amount of game prep I did recapping this one, because tough to really want to sink your teeth into a 6-0 game. Adam Ottavino came in, he walked 2, and then gave a base hit that scored 2. So yeah, I'd imagine that one of those runs went to Quintana. So maybe 5 earned over, or 6 2/3. But again, I don't think Quintana was the problem tonight. Ultimately, it was the Mets bats, and I'm almost giving them a pass because Bryce Miller was ridiculously good. I mean, that guy's got great stuff, and it shows you how good that rotation is in Seattle, because he's probably their 4th starter. That's how good their rotation is, with George Kirby, who we're not going to see in this series, luckily, and Logan Gilbert, who will be pitching on Saturday, and Luis Castillo is pitching on Sunday. It's a tough team to face in a 3-game series, and when you see the starting pitching they run out, you wonder how they're not better. Typically, it's because of the offense. Tonight, they're able to score. You hope that the Mets can quiet those bats with Sean Manaea on the mound on Saturday, and Luis Severino really needs to step up on Sunday. So it's going to be a very tough series for the Mets to win. Again, bats tonight just weren't there. They did have some opportunities that I should mention. Mark Vientos hit a 2-out double in the second. Then Francisco Alvarez struck out. 3rd inning, Brandon Nimmo hit a 2-out double. Jesse Winker grounded out. Their best chance came in the top of the 7th inning. At the time, it was still 2-0 Mariners. JD Martinez drew a walk, and this is when the Mets got into the Mariners bullpen. And then Jeff McNeil got a hit, his 2nd of the day. So you had 2 runners on, nobody out. That was the opportunity to potentially get back in the game. And honestly, had the Mets tied it, I think Jose Quintana probably gets pulled, and the Mets have a reliever slide into the game at that point. But Mark Vientos hits into a double play ball, ends the rally essentially. They aren't able to do anything there. 8th inning, they got a couple hits from Francisco Lindor and Jesse Winker, but they couldn't do anything with it as Pete Alonso came up with 2 outs, and he struck out, although the Mets were trailing 6-0 by that point anyway. So the Mets lose. The good news is the Braves lost as well, and they lost to the Rockies by a score of 6-5. The Cardinals beat the Royals, so now the Cardinals are a game and a half back. The Giants beat the Tigers, and they've now won 11 of their last 14 games. They're only 2 games back of the Mets now, so the Giants are becoming a real threat. Also, the Cubs have won 6 of their last 8. They're 4 games back. The Pirates, meanwhile, are 3-7 in their last 10. They've dropped to 4.5 games back. But a lot of teams still bunched within 5 games of each other. The Mets are leading that pack for now, but they got to make sure that they don't get swept this weekend. And it's going to be a tough series, as I mentioned, with the starting pitching that the Mariners are going to run out there. Hopefully, Sean Manaea can play stopper again, get the Mets to even up this series, and maybe Luis Severino can have a bounce back, and the Mets can still find their way to a very good road trip. At least take 1, hopefully find a way to take 2 more, and then the Mets get to come on home. They get a rest day on Monday, get back at it, trying to continue to further their standing in the NL wildcard race. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's show. I appreciate all of you who tuned in. If you're listening on the audio side, make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to get to 10,000 subs by the end of the season, so I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports, with our local experts from each team and our league-wide experts from each league, talking about Locked On Sports Today, which is streaming 24/7 on YouTube and on Amazon Fire TV.